And it is I, the strict pizzatarian, back at it again on another Friday night to talk a little bit more about the pizza, the pasta, and the amore, and life in Italy, living in Italy, expat life, all the good stuff. This week, I wanted to respond to an email that I received from a young individual thinking about making a life in Italy, coming here to study. But a lot of what I'm planning to talk about in this episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter will be relevant to people who are of a lot of different age brackets. And it's anybody really who is coming to a country or thinking about going to a country and thinking about making a new life there for themselves. And so let's just get right into it. All right, so let's just get started and jump right into it from an email from Pascal. Hi, Rafael. Hi, Pascal. I've just come across your channel and I'm really enjoying it. I'm very happy to hear that, Pascal. Thank you so much for letting me know, of course. And a friend and I are interested in moving to a small house near Torino at the age of 18 and buying a house around the 40 to 60,000 euro range and driving into Torino for university. We have been trying to figure out the logistics of how to do this on the cheap, seeing as we are full-time students, now both with jobs earning not that much. We are located in the Netherlands and we can drive down at the age of 18 with a U-Haul. Does it make sense to buy or rent out there with those ridiculously low prices? And should we do a year of working before attending university? Also, are there any okay paying jobs that you know that pay all right? Note that we both don't have degrees or speak fluent Italian. If you read this, thank you. You're welcome, Pascal. I'm going to do more than just reading it in this episode. I will be responding to this. And like I was saying, a lot of this will be geared towards an individual who will be kind of thinking about moving abroad for the first time as a young person and thinking about going to school. And really, even though Pascal is the one who asked the question here, I'm really going to be talking about this from my perspective based on my life experience and everything that I've been through, and really giving myself advice if I were at his age and thinking the same things that Pascal is thinking. So Pascal, I would say take everything that I'm going to say in here with a grain of salt, and you're going to have to do in the end what is right for you. But this is what I would consider in your position and under similar circumstances. So the first thing, let's talk about the home. The buying of the home. This is something that so many people consider when thinking about moving to Italy, especially because property in Italy can be very, very low cost, especially some of those €1 homes, which end up not actually costing €1. Done plenty of episodes on that. So if you're curious about the €1 home situation here in Italy, be sure to go check those out. But the one thing that I say to just about anybody who is considering to move out to Italy and thinking about the lower cost homes that you can find out here, and that would really be that there's a reason why so many of these homes do cost so little. When we're talking about in the 40 to 60,000 range, I would say that's a pretty fair price for an apartment in the north. But I guess when we're talking about something not far from Torino, it would depend on how far away we're talking about and the state of the place and so on, because you can find places that are 40 to 60,000 and that are worth that price. But then you can find places that are 20,000 and that are also really not worth that price at all, because maybe it would be so difficult to sell and do anything with that. Maybe in the end, really, it's only actually worth 5,000 euros. But the thing is also to consider what is the actual cost of living going to be when you are comparing living out in the country or maybe in a smaller town not so far away from Torino and having the cost of the home plus the cost of a car and fuel and potentially road fees and taxes and all of the other things that come along with this. And just off the top of my head, if we're thinking about this on, say, about a 4-year basis without doing all of the math, I might think that it could actually be just a little bit less expensive to rent an apartment somewhere near to the school, or at least near to some of the activities, or somewhere that is accessible via public transportation. And you might end up spending a little bit less in the end. And especially when you're a student, you've got so much schoolwork that you have to do, homework and everything, that do you really want to take the extra time necessary to commute from Torino to another town? or I mean, really replace Torino with any city and going out of that city to anywhere else in the country. We could be talking about Milan, Padova, Napoli, Firenze, like any of the major cities in the country. And personally, I would think about maybe not doing that. I know for me, having moved to Italy, it's definitely changed my perception of distance and travel time. And before moving to Italy, there was a point in time where I was working in a studio where to get from my apartment to the studio was about an hour and a half, an hour, 2 hours, depending on the day. And that was just traveling from one side of the city to the other side of the city. It wasn't even traveling from two different locations far apart from each other. It was actually just a matter of kilometers, but because of how things were set up there, it would take forever, especially during morning traffic and afternoon traffic. It was an absolute nightmare. Even with that being said, an hour and a half plus was what I expected, and it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just kind of like, all right, I'll enjoy it, and especially because I would take public transport on the way and I had to make a change, and it was actually in the center of the city, so I turned it into a fun little afternoon thing. Maybe I would go do a little shopping in the center, or go to this one place that used to sell popcorn in like a trash bag. They would just pop it fresh there. I'd go there maybe once a week to just pick some of that up, and I would make it fun for myself. I would always have some fun along the way back home. But since moving to Italy, even to consider going 45 minutes or 25 minutes, especially now when so much of my life happens in such a small area, that seems like just unbelievable to even consider having to go that far away. So that's something that I've experienced, and maybe I'm not explaining this in the way that would really drive it home for somebody who's never experienced that before, but depending on your location, your perception of distance and travel time and willingness can very much change and differ. So that would be one thing. Is that something that you're okay with taking all of that time? And I realize, as somebody who's sounds like from this email is not quite 18 yet, that maybe you haven't had that experience in life. And I know in the Netherlands that traveling around by bike is pretty common. Getting around by bike here is also, but maybe more within your town or more within a city. I do know of some cities where it's just you don't want to ride a bike. That would be playing with fire. Maybe more than fire there. But based also on trying to figure out the logistics, I can't help but wonder, maybe would it be more worthwhile to be in the city and renting something? Because then, say you want to go out with your friends and maybe you have a little bit of fun, and maybe that little bit of fun leads to a few beverages of a certain type of nature. Then in that case, having the ability to walk home or get a taxi home or an Uber, whatever app you might use, will make it easier, safer. I'm not going to say cheaper, but imagine you want to go on a Friday night with your friends, maybe in the city, and you have to make sure that you drive back home at the end of the night. And that's something that I think might add a little bit of tediousness to what's going on, and especially having to go back and forth to school every day. But maybe that could be an exciting adventure for you, especially if you are purchasing a house and you and your friend are doing it up. But there is a concern that I would have, especially because you mentioned that you don't speak Italian, and right now you're not earning that much. And on top, of course, you don't have degrees. But that's something I want to get into in a little bit here. And just before we get into the next section of this episode, I did want to say a quick thank you to those of you who help to make content like this possible through patreon.com/RafaelDiFuria or rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon. Your patronage and support to help make this project continue is greatly appreciated. So thank you also very, very much. One of the other things I do want to quickly talk about just in regards to purchasing a home. I remember thinking at that age also, like kind of around 18, hey, it'd be cool to move in with my friend, or hey, maybe a couple of us move into a place together and share it. And for some people that can be absolutely great, but for some people living with your best friend is maybe not the best idea and can ruin friendships. And sometimes it's better to have a little bit of space, or especially when you've probably never lived with anybody other than your family. This all sounds amazing. It sounds like, hey, I'm getting out into the world and we're going to go explore it and take over together. But doesn't quite exactly go that way. I mean, it could, but I don't know if I would say that would be the norm. But of course, there are people who get along with their best friends and can live with them. I personally haven't had that experience. I've had a lot of horrible experiences living with roommates that have led to that point where that's something that I don't even want to consider. It's left a very bad taste in my mouth. But I guess the more important point from there, especially when you are at 18, a lot in your life can change very quickly, especially from 18 till 25. Your group of friends can change. Your lifestyle can change. Your dreams and hopes and desires and what you want to do can greatly change. And so if I were looking back at what I was doing at 18, maybe some of my friends that I had back then, I don't know if I would want to be financially involved with to that extent that we're both invested into a home that we both may have to pay a mortgage on, or even if we can pay up front for. I don't know if I would want to be in that type of situation where either maybe we both one of us has to buy the other one out, or we have to figure out how to sell the house together. Because when we're talking about that 40 to 60,000 range, I would assume it's not going to be the most attractive property that everybody wants to buy. Because that's also another thing when thinking about purchasing a property. I've never purchased a property before, and I'm not in the position to, but I know that for me, if I were to start thinking about it, if I were in the position to start thinking about it, I would be looking at something that would not be so difficult to turn around and sell, either break even or at a little slight profit, or maybe more than just a little bit of a profit. But when we're talking about a small town outside of a city, I don't know if that's exactly where you're going to be able to earn your money back or even make a profit. Potentially, but when we're talking about the extremely cheap homes in Italy, that's going to be tricky. But when we're talking about extremely cheap homes in Italy, I don't know about that. I would have a very difficult time recommending that to anybody of any age. But let's get into some of the practical side, some of the financial side of things. When thinking about moving to Italy and purchasing a home here, another thing that just about anybody from anywhere that's not Italy will run into is that trying to get a mortgage or a loan or whatever it may be to try and actually get approved to purchase this home will run into some difficulties. Is it impossible? No, there are plenty of non-Italians and non-residents of Italy that do purchase property here. But especially when you're so young, approaching a bank or even a real estate agent, you may run into a situation where they may not take you so seriously. And especially when trying to get a mortgage or a loan, to be able to actually get approved, that will be difficult. But being a non-Italian, somebody who's never lived here before, it does present another issue, because there isn't the same thing like how in the United States we have this credit score that you can build up. There is something roughly along those lines in Italy, but it doesn't exist in the same way. And really what it comes down to is based on your work and your work contract and how you support yourself, as well as if you own any assets already and something that is inside of Italy. They don't want necessarily money coming from abroad or crypto funds. They want something tangible, because if you've missed your monthly payment, how are you going to upkeep with those payments that you've agreed to? And this is another thing even about being so young and thinking about purchasing with a friend is, what if you get fired from your job, or your friend gets fired from their job, or one of you fries out, and then the other one has to pay for what you've both agreed to pay for? That could put one of you and or both of you into a very tricky financial situation with a ton of debt on top of your head, unless you can pay for everything outright. And being on the younger side, having jobs that, as you've put it, Pascal, that you're not earning that much, I would say try and maybe save your money. Try and save as much as possible so you can have a little bit of a safety net while you're in school, so that you don't have to worry maybe about working as hard. If you can work, of course, while you're in school and do have that ability, that's great. If you're getting a more entry-level position where you don't speak the language and you don't have a degree, then that will put you in a position that will be harder to find a job that pays well enough. I would assume by having that type of equivalent position in the Netherlands, you might get paid better for the same type of work, but maybe at the end of the day, between cost of living and everything else, you'd probably be in a similar situation, but I can't say for sure because I really don't know the numbers and costs of living in the Netherlands and how much you earn there. But I would maybe guess that you might come a little bit of ahead of somebody in the equivalent position here in Italy, such as like a waiter, for example. But when you're in those types of jobs, you don't usually have job security, and there will often be some type of finite cutoff that your job won't go beyond. And that's because a lot of these contracts that are given on a very temporary basis. And unfortunately, it's led to a job cycle and a system where people, especially working as like waiters and so on, will only work for a certain amount of time, because after a certain period of time, their job may have to start paying more taxes or more this or more that, or give them a longer term contract that is harder to fire the person from. So that's something that even when you see some of the companies, like larger companies, like one of the major online shopping retailers in their warehouses, the people who work there usually can only get a contract for a certain period of time before they end up just being let go. And this has seemed to create a job market of sorts where people are moving in and out of jobs, and you can almost kind of schedule it out and only being able to rely on a job for, say, like 3 months, 9 months, 12 months, maybe 2 years. But it really just depends on the job and the type of contract in place. So this would be the type of situation where if you are a person trying to buy a home, the bank will say, hey, you don't have a long-term contract that will take you through the term of actually how long you'd have to pay off this house. So no, we're not going to do that. Even if you wanted to buy a phone or a computer and buy that on a monthly credit, you have to have some type of proof that you have money coming in every month and that you will be able to comfortably afford whatever it is that you have to pay, because it'll be the amount for that item plus on top the amount to actually live on. They will take all of these into account when thinking about potentially giving you a loan or giving you credit of any kind. Even if you want to get a credit card, you still have to show that you can be able to pay for that credit card. Getting a credit card in Italy isn't as easy as in some other parts of the world. And this is the reality of what anybody coming from another country outside of Italy would be able to expect, or somebody even just getting started with their life in Italy. You would need a cosigner for a lot of things. Or if you're coming from outside of the EU, not only do you have the problem of being able to try and get the visa and then permesso di soggiorno to actually be able to stay in the country, but then the work and finding a job that might even be willing to consider to sponsor what you're doing. And you have to do this all before you even arrive here, because you can't get the visa here in Italy, but you get the permission of stay when you're here in Italy. You have to get the permission in your own country unless you're a European national. In that case that you're an EU citizen, then getting here is probably the easier part, but being able to stay here is just as difficult. But then staying here theoretically could be just as difficult for just about anybody else. But this also kind of reminds me of 2 videos that I made last year talking about moving to Italy. One was from a young individual who was thinking about moving abroad, and we talked about this. This was the video where I cut my hair, not important to the context of this episode. And I think it's important to take into account some of the basic things, regardless of your age, that are important for moving abroad and for what a person would be able to expect, because there are going to be those things that are the same for a person who is just starting out in life and for somebody who's starting out again in life, moving to another country. And I think it was actually my last outdoor episode of last year where I was sitting on the piazza here in Rovigo responding to a message I got from a guy who wanted to move to northern Italy with his family, and thinking about using northern Italy, I think if I remember correctly, as a jump off point, like as a base for being able to travel around and maybe living outside of a city, but close enough to get there. And there are those things that you have to think about. Are you going to be working in the city and living out in the country? Are you going to be studying in the city and living out in the country, or having your kids in that you have to bring them into school every day? What are going to be those factors that work best for you and make your life the easiest that you possibly can have it when transitioning into that new life in your new country? Because when you are living in a new place, you want to make things as easy as possible for yourself, because there will be challenges left and right that are going to come at you. I'm not trying to scare anybody here. This is just the reality of what life will be like, regardless of the country that you go to. But maybe not regardless of your financial situation. Of course, if you are more financially comfortable in life, some of these hurdles will not be there for you. But even if you are very financially comfortable in life, you still will have those legal hurdles to get over, maybe even to find an apartment or that you want to rent or that you want to buy, whatever it may be. There will be these things about getting used to the new system and figuring out what life in that place is actually like. And also another thing that I've mentioned in past videos was that a friend of mine who is a real estate agent up in Alto Adige had mentioned to me as just a piece of advice, not that I'm in a position to purchase a home or even thinking about purchasing a home right now, but he said, if you are thinking about purchasing a home, regardless of the location, try renting there for 2 years, try living there for 2 years before even taking that plunge into actually like settling and investing yourself into that place. Because during that 2 years, you will get an amazing sense of what living there is like. You find your bakeries, your stores, your supermarkets, whatever it is that you are looking for throughout your everyday needs. And I know in my life that has definitely been something that would prove to be a great rule of thumb, because in the space of 2 years, maybe I moved to some place and I've realized at the end of that 2 years, like, oh gosh, yeah, I don't know about that. That may have been a bad idea. Thank goodness I don't own property here and I'm not tied to this place. And I mean, even furthermore, I will say even being single and not being tied to a person who is tied to that place, because also being tied not only financially, but emotionally to a place can be very, very difficult when you are thinking about making that next move in life and getting to that next step, because sometimes being detached can really make that difference between you going on to the next thing or you being stuck. I hate to sound like I'm being cynical about being in a relationship, but just realistically speaking here, while having somebody in your life being there with you is a beautiful thing, if you and that person are in different places and maybe that other person is very tied to that place because of their job or their family, whatever it is, then that's going to be something that pulls at you that will maybe potentially make it more difficult for you to leave that place. And just imagine that you have the perfect person in your life, but you feel like you're living in hell. Just imagine what that must be like to go through and try wanting to get away from there, but having to stay where you are because at that point in time, that's what logically makes the most sense, to be able to keep the relationship together because that person's livelihood is based there or their family is based there. I've known plenty of people who have gone through that situation and have had a very difficult time because they can't stand where they live. I'm not saying that everybody goes through this. And there are some people, and this is, I guess, even a part of being in a relationship and before marriage and so on, that you figure out what are your goals in life? What are your morals and ethics and goals and dreams? Are they in line with each other? Are there going to be things that present themselves as challenges? And in every relationship, of course, there will be challenges. But are those challenges that you are able to overcome or live with? You don't necessarily even want to push yourself to be able to live with. Anyway, I'm getting into a whole different topic here. Definitely maybe a topic that would be great for anybody to listen to who's just getting started out in life and maybe who hasn't dated all that much. But I think what I'm going to do is round out this episode here and just say a huge thank you to those of you who are Patreon supporters who help to make content like this possible on a monthly basis. Thank you also very much from the bottom of my heart. It is truly appreciated, everything that you guys do to help me to be able to continue moving forward with Not Your Average Globetrotter and be able to publish these episodes every week here on YouTube or now, of course, on your favorite podcasting apps. And of course, a huge thank you to those of you who are subscribed on YouTube and have been sharing and liking the videos. And also, especially thank you to those of you who always make your thoughts known and keep the conversation going in the comment section down below on YouTube. And also a huge thank you to those of you who've been subscribed or following whatever the lingo is on your favorite podcasting app of choice. And of course, another thank you to those of you who've been letting me know that you've been enjoying these episodes and finding them helpful on Apple Podcasts, just because that is the one podcasting platform where you can actually write a little note. And of course, as always, I'm Rafael de Furia. This has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Stay safe and stay healthy. I'll see you all later. Have a great one.